Hey guys, I just finished this book today. Our homeschooling group decided to do a book study, and this one is only about 70 pages long. It's a mercifully simple, short book on homeschooling. It's by Durenda Wilson called The Unhurried Homeschooler. And man, there has been so much good content in here. The first chapter is just think about why you want to homeschool, what's the priority for your family. And I've really gotten such help from this book. So she says that the beauty of homeschooling our kids is that they have the chance to think their own thoughts and come up with their own ideas, and they actually have the opportunity to experiment. All of this is possible if we give them just time. So why do your kids need to slow down? Why do you need to slow down? Learning is snuffed out quickly under pressure, and you want to facilitate an environment in which your kids love to learn and are independent in wanting to learn, and they can find the answers on their own. This is just one of the very simple ways to homeschool. She said it's all right to keep things simple. You don't have to get bogged down with a perfect curriculum, the perfect routine. And she said that children are apt to learning on their own in their own way if we allow them the space to do so. So be a student of observing your child and trust and respect their natural ability to learn. Now, a lot of us, me included, can get really freaked out all of a sudden. So what happens if you don't feel prepared? Because I'm sure there's a time when every homeschooler doesn't feel prepared. Even I know some homeschoolers that are homeschooling and their parents have like college degrees in education. And I think they still struggle from time to time. They don't have all the answers just because they have a nice diploma. She says, I firmly believe that as a parent, you have a God-given compass inside of you when it comes to raising your kids. He equips you for what he puts in front of us to do. And raising our children is just one of the greatest callings and accomplishments in life. So you have an internal compass. And one of the important points in here is that parental instincts will grow over time. And I think that's why sometimes we treat the oldest different than we treat the youngest, because we are learning about what's a priority and what's not. And we've got to give ourselves a lot of grace and a lot of love and just understand that we're all growing. All of us are. So chapter, let me see, I think this is 3 or 4. She says, what homeschooling looks like for us. What does unhurried homeschooling look like on a daily basis? She said in the early years, other kids were studiously poring over their workbooks in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. Our kids were playing outside and drawing and painting and doing puzzles, helping with chores and helping with their younger siblings. They had a daily routine that included chores like personal hygiene, making their beds, unloading the dishwasher, and putting away laundry and folding it. And they focused a lot in the early years, and by that I mean like before the kids reached 6 and 7 years old. So they didn't start teaching their kids to read until they were quite a bit older, or at least until the kid told them themselves that they were ready to learn in as many words or in their actions, in wanting to, like, pretending to read or something like that. So they focused a lot on just encouraging a family life and doing daily skills together, because her point is kids are constantly soaking up information, even if it doesn't seem like it, even if you're not pinpointing all of their education. they are absorbing information. And so they focused on life skills together as a family and really bonding together, creating a really strong foundation, and just a lot of character building, and not getting overwhelmed and bogged down with bookwork and paperwork right off of the bat, because that's not a good way to homeschool. I don't want to homeschool like that. I don't want to have to constantly be over my kids' shoulders. And so as the kids became older, the elementary years, the workbooks grew more difficult. The kids would write out scripture because that was a priority for the husband. Let's see. So she didn't try to turn anything that they were interested in into a big project. If she did, they often lost interest. So when I took ownership of something, they had to give up their ownership of it and consequently wanted to move on to something else. So I did a little dance of asking questions to find out whether or not their interest was piqued by what they had covered. So I would drop it if they didn't want more. Questions can be like such an important thing for development for your kids. Sometimes they would go off on their own and continue doing what they wanted with that topic, and sometimes they moved on to something else. The development of a child's body and mind and spirit happens best in a secure and loving environment. So when their foundational development is properly placed, their education occurs much more readily, and they cannot be pushed or hurried, or you'll shortchange the process. So in the high school and middle school years, she tried different curriculum over the years. Some worked, some didn't. Some worked for a while and then didn't anymore. But our basics stayed pretty much the same. When the kids got into high school, they owned their education for the most part. I told them it was fully their responsibility, and they helped choose the best curriculum along with me, but they were responsible to meet the standards of their high school, local high school in credits. They also did required testing. The discipline and dedication might sound like the opposite of what I've been talking about in this chapter, but it isn't. Because they were given a large amount of room to learn on their own for so long, they weren't burnt out for bookwork. So far, all of our kids have dived in and taken on the challenges of high school. They are old enough to understand the systems we in place and we sometimes have to work with, and they are wise enough to understand their lives do not succeed or fail based on a test score. Such an important thing. With our help and guidance, our older kids are capable of grasping the idea that a test is not necessarily a gauge, an accurate gauge of their intelligence. Their worth does not it's not determined by a test score. It's merely a small part of a very big picture of where they are educationally. So they've also traded skills with other family. For instance, Durenda was very good at growing a garden, and she traded skills with another family that was very good musically. So they traded classes basically for each other. She has a sample schedule in here. After lunch was always a time of quiet. They always ate and went to bed around the same time every single day, kept things very simple. One of the things that they said in here about the importance of just having an unhurried homeschooling routine was that they did a study. There was a Smithsonian study done on the 3 most important factors for raising a genius. And the number 1 was parents who facilitate a loving and warm environment of learning. Number 2 was not being overly concerned about socialization. In fact, it said scant socialization for the first couple of years. And it was really surprising for me. They don't get overwhelmed with, you've got to be in this sports class and you've got to be at this swimming lesson. And, they didn't run around a lot. They went to the library, they went to church, they went to the grocery store. They did not become a cult and just ignore everybody else. But she said there's an inward battle. Everybody who reads this is likely facing the feeling that there's pressure to perform. You want your kids to reach their full potential. Just where is that fine balance between my kids need to know this, but I'm not going to be hurried about it. And she talks about just taking a look at the public schools and how they are constantly changing the standard for what kids need to know. And she said, what are the results? It's like shooting at a moving target. Weary parents and kids who are confused and dazed, feeling like failures. That's the results of trying to follow the system whenever it's constantly changing as to what your kids should be pressured to learn by a certain time. So as parents, we have the privilege and responsibility to look beyond these pressures and to know and just have peace about our kids are going to learn in due time. You don't have to be concerned with keeping up with other kids. So what does it look like in a daily routine? Unhurried homeschooling looks like allowing your kids to learn at their own pace. Big thing here. Being a student of our own children, being tuned into what our children are ready for and are ready to learn, and when they're not, and then following through when they are. Being willing to experiment through trial and error to find out what works and what doesn't for your particular family. Being flexible. Unhurried is about being flexible. Being more concerned about what's best for your kids than what makes you feel and look good. Ouch. Right? Starting education slowly and gently, remembering that kids are always learning, and adding work incrementally until they are carrying a full load, which is again a custom fit for them. There's another spot in this book that says the kids can learn all that they need to prepare them for college in about 2 to 3 years. That's all. That's it. Remembering who we are and the example we set, how we approach life and handle stress, and our worldview and etc. will have a greater impact on our children than any curriculum or any workbook. Unhurried homeschooling is about remembering education is much, much bigger picture than workbook and memorization and etc. It's part of taking full responsibility for your children's education and not being overly concerned about what others think, but making our decisions based on our own intuition and knowledge and God's leading. So trusting in our children's natural desire to learn and in their internal clock, but also knowing when it's in their best interest to be challenged in order to grow. Being creative in how we meet any homeschooling laws put place by our state. Sometimes this means discovering alternatives to testing and reporting. So what unhurried homeschooling is not? What unhurried homeschooling is not? It's not refusing to give directions or having routine and order. She says in another place in this book, routine is so important. It gives structure and security to the kids. It's very important right off of the bat to have a good routine, she said. Refusing boundaries or expectations, turning a blind eye to character issues, ignoring state laws regarding homeschooling, letting our kids run uncontrollably, ignoring questions we have about our children and potential learning issues, refusing to challenge our kids to try things that they think they can't do, refusing to make them do things that they don't want to do, rejecting our responsibility as parents to raise law-abiding citizens. So Are your kids under any unnecessarily pressures that may be stifling their learning? Are there any areas in which you need to grow? Any areas that you need to be unhurried in? Or maybe you need to have a little bit more discipline in some areas. Because your kids will learn a lot from you. If you're a disciplined person, your kids will learn to be. If you give them the right structure to flourish in that. So chapter 6 is about homeschooling through crisis, and just they had some incredibly hard hard life and death situations. Their 8th baby that they had to have heart surgery and didn't get to come home for 2 months. So she ends this chapter by saying the journey of this whole ordeal was very natural. It was hard, it was beautiful, it was full of God's presence. It was not hurried, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. That is the one reason why we love homeschooling. Life is messy, and sometimes it's really hard. Although we want to hide this kind of pain from our children, it's not fair to them, because they will be sorely disappointed when they leave home and find out that life doesn't work that way. Isn't that, after all, our job anyway, to prepare them for real life? It is a privilege and an honor to walk with and through the pain with them. When we embrace the trials and grief, when they see us trusting God in our deepest pain, we show them a very real, very powerful, and very loving God. No Sunday school lesson can come close to conveying a more accurate picture of God than walking through these seasons with our kids. So, the next chapter is about freedom. It's all about freedom. Just find peace and ask the Lord to help you to sort through all this stuff. But the kids can find security and just a lot of sense of normal in keeping a routine. So maintaining some form of the status quo can be comforting when life feels really irregular, when there's a death in the family, and maybe you can't keep up the quite same level of work. So my voice is definitely going out. But again, it's all about freedom. So she says, the Smiths love reading from a very early age. Their children have their noses in a book. Their kids learn to read around the age of 4. The Joneses love outdoors, and they take lots of nature walks and collect bugs and leaves, and they love to talk about everything they experience together. Their kids don't read until they're closer to 7 years old, but they sure know how to communicate what they've seen and experienced. The Williamses need to travel a lot because of the parents' work situation. The kids have seen many historical sites and cities and possess a wealth of knowledge about history and geography. So each family is covering the basics, but from different angles and with emphasis in certain areas that are unique to their family and children. So just facilitate an area of learning, because at some point you will have some limits for how much you can teach them. So just prepare your kids for life. That's the underlying thing here. She said that one very important and last and final thought was that a strong work ethic is so crucial. And how can we instill that? She says by doing chores. Age-appropriate chores early on, and they've always known that they have an important role in keeping the house in order. They load and unload the dishwasher, take out the trash, make their beds, and tidy their rooms. They do yard work. They help with meals and weekly cleaning, and a family chore chart can be very helpful in these things on a daily basis. We have never paid our kids to do the chores. We simply feel are part of being of the family. I'm not saying you shouldn't, But we choose not to because we don't feel it represents a true view of adulthood. We're preparing our kids to be adults. And as adults, there are a lot of things that we don't get paid for. She says they do have a running list of extra chores that they call paying jobs that are above and beyond the regular chores. However, the kids aren't allowed to do these until the regular ones are done. So inspecting the kids' work is also an important part of teaching work ethic. Generally, they have a specific amount of time. She likes to use a timer. One very important thing is that when you're overlooking their work, you're not shooting for perfection, just improvement. So that's kind of like the underlying wisdom in this book. And I skipped through a lot, but it's already like 20 minutes long. So get this book, man. If you're thinking about homeschooling, I think it's only about maybe $6-7, written October 2017. So very, very good book, and I highly, highly recommend it.